We're going to look at a king named Abijam or Abijah, depending on which book of the Bible you're reading about today. Have you ever noticed how common it is for people to have two biographies? I think about these famous athletes or musicians, respected pastors, politicians, things like this. How often we discover that someone we admire had a public, story that might have been inspiring, but then you find out that the private story was very troubling. In other words, the public biography didn't match the private biography, and that it's so common, and it is often causes us some heartache, doesn't it? Like no matter how brightly someone shines, when the dark side kind of comes into the light, we never look at them the same, do we? When that happens, and I could drop some examples, but you got athletes, Lance Armstrong, he's go, and then find out, he was, using steroids and so on and so forth. You got Tiger Woods, everyone loves him, and then you find out his private life. The list goes on and on, right? You could probably think of a pastor right now that was very influential in your life. Maybe he was a celebrity guy, maybe he was a guy you actually knew, but when the private life came out, man, it just... It might have wrecked you a little bit, all right? And because you're left going, well, which biography is the real one here? Like, which one really tells the true story? Does the bad discredit the good? Should we disregard the bad so we can keep the good? And if the person was influential in our lives, man, we can be left pretty disillusioned. But whatever the case, two biography living always makes us lose respect for the person, doesn't it? But before we spend too much time talking about other people's biographies, I think that we should acknowledge the uncomfortable truth is that most of us don't just have one biography either, do we? Most of us, if we're honest with ourselves, there's a gap. There's a gap between what people see and then what God sees. And just pause and think about this. If God were to write your biography today, would you want anyone to read it? Like as is right now, God writes your biography as he sees things. Would you be, and then he's gonna push print and send it out. He's gonna push send, he's gonna post it. Would you be like, Lord, stop the press. Hold on, let me straighten a few things out first, and then you send that thing, right? Today we're going to talk about this king, Abijah, who had two different biographies. In First Chronicles, he's called Abijah, and in Second Chronicles, he's called Abijah. In First Kings, he's called Abijam. And the two accounts of his life to tell two very different stories. And so let's read the first one. Let's listen to his first biography out of 2 Chronicles chapter 13. If you got a good old-fashioned paper Bible, now's the time. You open it up, 2 Chronicles chapter 13. On mine, it's page 537. I don't know if that helps or not. It's an old pastor joke. So what was happening here? Let me summarize the first part. On the surface, this is a very impressive story we have. King Abijah, he finds it. Now, this is at the time when Israel, it started off as one united kingdom. Pastor Mark explained this last week. It was one united kingdom, and then after Solomon, it split, and Rehoboam became the king of Judah, the southern kingdom. That's where Jerusalem and the temple and everything was. And then the northern kingdom continued to be called Israel, and that was led by a king named Jeroboam who had rebelled against Solomon, or against Rehoboam, sorry. So King Abijah, what we're about to read here, he finds himself facing King Jeroboam and the army of the northern kingdom. And the odds are really stacked against him. His army is outnumbered 2-1. And they've got and the northern army has, a much stronger position. And before the battle begins, though, Abijah stands up and gives this speech that would convict the most lost of sinners and inspire the most honest of saints. He gives this speech, and he basically he calls Israel out for their idolatry. He says, "You guys, you have left Yahweh. You have left the Lord. You drove out all the priests. You're not offering good sacrifices. You replaced them with golden calves. You're putting your trust in all the wrong things." But then he says this. I'm going to start in verse 10, 2 Chronicles 13, verse 10. He says, "But as for us, the Lord is our God, and we have not forsaken him. The priests who serve the Lord are the sons of Aaron, and the Levites assist them." In other words, we're still doing the priestly ministry that God prescribed in his law, but you guys have abandoned this. Verse 11, it says, "Every morning and evening they present burnt offerings and fragrant incense to the Lord. They set out the bread on the ceremonially clean table, and they light the lamps on the gold lampstand every evening. We are observing the requirements of the Lord our God." In other words, y'all ain't, we are. "But you have forsaken him." Verse 12 says, "God is with us. He is our leader. His priests with their trumpets will sound the battle cry against you. People of Israel, do not fight against the Lord, the God of your ancestors, for you will not succeed." And so you hear what he's saying there. He draws a line in the sand. And God's people are split in half. And half of them have abandoned worshiping the Lord in the way that the Lord had said he must be worshiped. And then the other half have stayed, in their minds at least, faithful to worshiping the Lord the way he had prescribed. And Abijah draws a line in the sand and says, "You guys are on the wrong side of this thing. Here we are, we're staying faithful in every detail. And so you guys, you're going to fight against us. You're fighting against the Lord. We know who our Lord is. He's on our side. The Lord is our God. We haven't forsaken him. He's with us. He's our leader." See, it's hard to not like this guy. Isn't it hard if you love the Lord, when you listen to this, when you listen to Abijah's sermon, you're like, yeah, come on, man. He seems like he defends the worship of Yahweh. He points people back to God's covenant. He publicly declares his dependence on God. Like it's like in his mind, it's almost like he can still hear Joshua saying, "Choose this day whom you will serve." And it seems like Abijah has said, "I'm going to serve the Lord. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord." And then when the battle happens, exactly what Abijah said would happen happens. Abijah says, "Israel, here's the deal. We're going to blow our trumpets and the Lord is going to come fight for us." And then that's exactly what happens. Jeroboam, who led Israel into idol worship, he has surrounded Judah now for an ambush, outnumbering Judah 2-1. The situation looks absolutely hopeless, but Abijah's people, they follow his lead, they cry out to the Lord, they blow the trumpet, and God gives them victory. And let's jump down to verse 18. Listen to how it's sort of summarized here. It says that the Israelites were subdued on that occasion, and the people of Judah were victorious. Listen, because they relied on the Lord, the God of their ancestors. You see, if this is all we knew about this guy, King Abijah, he'd be a hero, wouldn't he? Like the elementary school would be full of a bunch of little boys named Abijah. You'd be like Abijah R and Abijah D and Abijah L, right? Because you'd have to. But have you ever met an Abijah? I haven't. You probably never met one. Why? Because even though his act of faith in this moment was sincere. And his leadership was courageous in this moment. It's very admirable. This biography doesn't tell the whole story. He's a two-biography guy. So let's flip over to 1 Kings and read his other biography. Go over to 1 Kings chapter 15. I'm going to start at verse 1. It says, in the 18th year of the reign of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, Abijah became king of Judah, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 years. His mother's name was Maacah, daughter of Abishalom. He committed all the sins his father had done before him. His heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his forefather had been. Nevertheless, for David's sake, the Lord his God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem by raising up a son to succeed him and by making Jerusalem strong. For David had done what was right in the eyes of the Lord and had not failed to keep any of the Lord's commands all the days of his life, except in the case of Uriah the Hittite. There was war between Abijah and Jeroboam throughout Abijah's lifetime. As for the other events of Abijah's reign, all he did, and are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? There was war between Abijah and Jeroboam, and Abijah rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David, and Asa his son succeeded him as king. So the grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our Lord endures forever. Are we talking about the same guy here? Biography 1, this guy was amazing, huge leader for the Lord. Biography 2 doesn't mention much other than, and he committed the same sins his dad committed. He repeated his father's sins, as we so often do, because his heart wasn't fully devoted to the Lord. Yeah, he fought some battles, but the main thing about him is that his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord. You're like, what's going on here? In Chronicles, he's standing before the nation, declaring his trust in God. And Kings were told he committed all the sins of his father, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord. One bio sounds inspiring. The other one sounds deeply concerning. So which one's the real one? Which one's telling the truth here? The answer is both. Right? Chronicles, it highlights a moment when Abijah trusted God, and God did something truly powerful through his leadership. But Kings evaluates the overall direction of his heart. And so how do you reconcile these two? Was he a hero or a zero? Which way do we go on this one? Should we try to be like him or not be like him? Most commentators postulate that Abijah began his reign dependent upon God while he was still weak, but then became proud when he became strong. And that's a lot like us, isn't it? When we're healthy, we're less likely to depend on God than when we fall sick. When we are in a time financially of abundance, we are less likely to depend on God than when we are in true need. But you might wonder, though, why do Kings and Chronicles report such different details of his life here? Think about this. Why would Chronicles go, here's everything to celebrate, and Kings would go, here's everything to bemoan? Let me not give you a fish here. Let's have a teach you to fish kind of moment, okay? When you get a question like that, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take your study Bible, because you need to have a good study Bible. Like the NIV study Bible or the ESV study Bible are two really good options. And what I want you to do is flip to the beginning of that book of the Bible and then read the information it has telling you about when was this wrote and who wrote it and to whom was it written. What was the occasion? What was going on? And why was this written? This is like maybe the most important thing you can do when it comes to trying to understand the Bible, is get the context. Right? So you flip there, and if you were to do that for both the book of First Kings and the book of Second Chronicles, what you would find is that they were written at two different times. And see, after the kingdom was divided into two, and there was failure king after failure king after failure king, eventually God allowed his people to be carried off into exile to show them that they cannot continually break his covenant and still be blessed. That his people have to uphold their end of the deal. And they would go off into exile. Now, First Kings is written to a people who are in exile. And they're going, how on earth did we end up here? We're supposed to be God's special people. And First and Second Kings is really answering the question, how did we get here? And it's gonna show unfaithfulness after unfaithfulness after unfaithfulness. Chronicles is written to the people after they get out of exile, and now there's a new beginning, a restored people of God, where they can kind of start becoming a nation again. And if Kings answers, how did we get here? Chronicles answers the question, where do we go from here? So the chronicler, he will record most specifically the times they got it right. So he looks at Abijah and he says, be like Abijah when he got it right. That's where you go from here. But the writer of Kings said, look at Abijah. You wondering how we got here? When he got it wrong, that's how we got here. Don't be like that. That's why this kind of makes sense. And you'll even notice that their names are different. Now, if you read for example, in the ESV, in Chronicles, he's called Abijah, and in Kings, he's called Abijam. The NIV just kind of makes it easy for you and keeps Abijah even in First Kings. And some people say, well, that's like it's like sometimes we call someone Pete or Peter. It's fine. We spell it a little different. We say it a little different. It's a variant, an acceptable variant on a name. That's possible. But what is more likely is that it actually reflects, maybe he might have even changed his name. Or people might have started calling him something different as his leadership changed. See, Abijah means the Lord is my father. Abijam means father of the sea. And so something theological is in that name change. But big picture here, the inspiring biography is true. The troubling biography, it's true. And what was the problem? The problem was he had a divided heart. There was a part of him that said, hey, let's stay faithful to the Lord. But then there was a part of him that said, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to be let's be our own kings. And the same is true of us. Like it's easy to sit here and kind of poke at this guy for having two different biographies. I think the main part of why these accounts are written was so that God's people would examine ourselves. What is it? Socrates said, an unexamined life is not worth living. That we would examine ourselves and have the desire to have wholehearted devotion to the Lord. When one part of our life is devoted to God, but here's what we do. We keep a certain other area or a couple other areas undevoted. Here, we will always end up with a gap between our public and our private biographies. Always. And so the question is, how do you close that gap? How do you close the gap between the private and the public? Well, one way is you could make the private public You could just walk around with a sign or something. Here's all the stuff I've done wrong. I remember when I worked construction, there was the sign that said, "It's been fill in the blank days since our last safety incident," and every day it'd put another number up. And then one day I went in and it says 0, and then in different writing it says, "Thanks a lot, Dave." No punctuation, just all capital letters. And so I don't know what Dave did, but I mean, you could carry around a sign with you at all times that lists all your worst sins, and then you just keep a running tally on how long it's been since you committed that. You could take the public or the private and make it public, but just stay the same. But obviously, that's not what the Lord desires. I think what the Lord desires is that we get ruthlessly honest with Him and with ourselves about any area of our life that is not currently devoted to Him. That we would be the type of people who on a regular basis would say, "Lord, search me, know my heart. Show me anything in me that doesn't please you. And then teach me what to do with it." Psalm 139, 23 and 24. That we would pray that prayer of self-examination. That we'd be so devoted to God that there would be no part of our life that would be left undevoted. That if there's a certain compartment of our life where we're going, "Lord, the door's locked on that one and I don't want you in there," that we'd be the type of people who go, no, Lord, blow that door open. It's all yours, and we would surrender that to Him. See, here's the bottom line. One biography living begins with wholehearted devotion to God. That's the bottom line. One biography living, where does it start? It starts with wholehearted devotion to God. Not half-hearted, not divided heart devotion, but wholehearted devotion to God. It really is a shame that Abijah didn't take that bold faith that he had and apply it to other areas of his leadership and other areas of his personal life, isn't it? He could have ended well. He could have kept going like that, but he didn't end well. But you can. Think about this. You can end well. You can go from today until whenever the Lord calls you home, and you could have the biography that God would write match the biography that people see. If you wouldn't want anyone to read the biography God would write about you, the good news is you have time. You have the opportunity to have the ending changed. And it doesn't get changed by trying to polish up your image, trying to pretend or anything like this. It gets changed by surrendering the parts of your life that you're holding back from God. I just assume that there's some part of your life. I don't know. Maybe it's your finances. Like, Lord, you're Lord of everything except my wallet. Or maybe it's your sexuality. Maybe it's your thought life. Maybe it's your bitterness about that thing that person did to you, or I don't know. But the question isn't, here's what I want you to hear. Like, think through this, not like a legalist, but like someone who knows the gospel. The question is not, how can I perform better in this area, but what part of my heart still belongs to me instead of God? See, one biography living doesn't come by just trying harder to do better. That doesn't work. You'll take one step forward, 3 steps back. One biography living begins when every compartment of your life is devoted to the Lord. And if you keep an area to yourself, 2 biographies will be written. It's a guarantee. Just think about the fastest way to have 2 biographies written about you is to keep an area that you go, God, I don't give a rip what you say. I'm going to do what I want. And you fill in that blank. I don't. And this feels especially appropriate on Father's Day, doesn't it? because no one will suffer from no one will suffer the consequences of our two-biography living like our spouse and our children. Like dads, we want to get this right. Husbands, we want to have a near perfect overlap between what people see of us and who we really are. We want to be men of integrity. If I could wave a wand over the United States of America and take any problem and make it just 10% better, you know what I'd pick? I would make men 10% more like Jesus. Just 10% closer to being men of integrity. When men of God surrender their whole heart to God and become transformed by God through that surrender, through that relationship, there is a blessing that trickles down into every portion of society. When God gets a hold of a man and a man is truly transformed by God, that his wife gets a better husband. His kids get a more patient and kind, loving, well-disciplined dad. His place of employment is blessed. His employer is blessed. His neighborhood is safer. When men are more like Jesus, women are safer. When men are more like Jesus, fewer kids grow up in homes without a dad. When men are more like Jesus, marriages work. So fathers, husbands, we got to be pretty committed to closing this gap. And the good news is that God isn't finished writing your biography. Like, as long as you got a pulse, man, check. You got one? Yeah? As long, you got a chance. God's not done writing your story. Another chapter can be written. And it's not going to happen by doing one big act of faith. Abijah did that. One big act of faith is no substitute for that day in, day out, diesel engine, John Deere tractor plugging along, day in, day out faithfulness. Just that every day, my goal, I want to be devoted, fully devoted to you, Lord. That's what he's looking for. And so I think both these biographies, they show us something. They show us something to aspire to and something to avoid. But bigger picture, both biographies, they point us to a much better king. Abijah had a moment of big faith. Abijam had a divided heart. So do we. But Jesus is the king whose public life and his private life matched perfectly. You think of this. For a man to live to the age of 33 or so on, and to have his public and his private life match perfectly. There's no gap. There's no darkness hidden in there. There's no little secret. There's no divided loyalty. He loved the Father with all his heart, his soul, and all his much, if you remember Pastor Mark's sermon last week. He loved the Lord with all his much. And because of his death and resurrection, here's the deal. Here's what he'll do. He won't just forgive our divided hearts. He will transform them. Because on the cross, here's what happened. Jesus was treated how we deserve. He paid the penalty for our divided hearts. And then what he'll do is that because of what he did on the cross, and then the empty tomb, he will actually give us his righteousness. He will allow us to be treated by the Father the way he deserves. He got treated how we deserve so that we can be treated like he deserves. And we don't just get his righteousness, as if that's not enough. We get the relationship. Process that. We don't just get his righteousness. We get his relationship, the relationship that he has. What the New Testament teaches is the mind-blowing truth. This is the most unbelievable thing in the Bible is this right here, is that when you put your faith in Jesus Christ, the very life of God is fused to your life and he takes up residence within you. He doesn't just forgive you, he moves in. And your life is joined to his, and he's with you and you're with him, and he's in us. And as you walk with him, not only does he forgive your divided heart, he transforms it. He doesn't just forgive the past and say, okay, now do better. He gives your past, and then he says, now I'll help you. I'll walk with him. Ryan, does that mean it's time to wrap up? Is that the signal? See, the point I want you to learn from Abijah and Abijam is not just, hey, close the gap. The point is surrender every part of your life to the Lord, every part, and he will walk with you and he'll help you close the gap.